Hello, Sumo fans. Welcome back to another exciting recap show here at 42 Opinions. This week is going to be a little bit different than we've ever done before. So there's some good news and some bad news. The bad news is I am solo, and that is because John and I could not get together for the end of this tournament due to all these summer commitments that we have. But the good news is we will each be doing our own show. So you will get double the content, effectively 84 opinions, though you always get 84 opinions because we're talking back and forth. But this time it'll be two separate videos. And this is going to be a little bit like a reaction in a way. This is the wee hours of the morning. Due to my plans, I had to record immediately after the tournament was over, and I'm still kind of in shock by the final result, and I don't have John here to help me dissect everything. So, my opinions are going to be quite raw today. Anyway, I want to just give a quick warning, since this video will probably go out way sooner than some people might have finished the tournament. If you have not watched the final result, do not listen at this point. Now that you have your spoiler alert, I take no responsibility. Let's start right off at the top, like we always do, with Hakuho. I do want to say congratulations. He wins the tournament with a 15-0, Zensho Yusho against Terunofuji, who also came into the final day 14-0. The first time that's happened since July of 2012, where the final two opponents on the last day were both undefeated going into the final day. What a match. There's just so much to say. There's so much to unpack with the fact of even Hakuho coming back. So let me just start first by talking about the match and then get into a little bit more about Hakuho and the future and all of that. The match looked like a Yokozuna battle, which gives probably more credit to Terunofuji than Hakuho in some ways, because Hakuho over the years has been in this position so many times. He's been the guy since he was 20 years old. So this is not his first rodeo. It is very impressive that he came back after getting knee surgery, after being 36, after being told he's washed up, he's done. And, I don't think anybody expected him to win this tournament going into the tournament because his health has been so unstable. With that being said, as he was racking up the wins throughout the tournament, it seemed like, okay, this is a Hakuho tournament. He could win this thing. On the flip side, you see Terunofuji, who is just dominating like no one has besides Hakuho for such a very long time, that it wasn't guaranteed that Hakuho was going to take this one out. Now let's get to the match itself, where it really was a Yokozuna battle. I really didn't know who was going to win. Unlike, I love Takakeisho, but every time Takakeisho and Terunofuji fought, I felt like Takakeisho had to pull out some trick to win. I knew Terunofuji was strong enough to beat Hakuho, so it really was a matter of who was going to get who. And that's where we get into some interesting territory. Hakuho was doing some of his later in career slaps, which it's allowed, that's fine. He's getting aggressive and everything. And he did pull quite a throw at the end, which was legit. What's going to get him into hot water, and, it means nothing for the result, was the yell at the end, which just, in American sports, you wouldn't even bat an eye. But for a Yokozuna in Grand Sumo to yell the way he did and pump his fist the way he did, he's going to get so much backlash. Particularly because he's already the guy who's got the backlash. Because he, couple of years ago now, he, led the crowd in singing and things like that, just stuff that you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to break the rules in sumo. On top of it all, it's really like putting it in your opponent's face to do something like that. And maybe if you're a lower ranked guy, you might get away with it, but him being the top guy. With that being said, I fully understand he's a competitor and he's a competitor first. And this meant a lot to him to win. But the Yokozuna councils, they're definitely going to be gunning for him, wanting him to retire, wanting Terunofuji, the more Yokozuna-like talent, to be the top guy. I don't know what Hakuho's future is, and I will get into the other bad part about that fight, which it is what it is, and it was something we were worried about this whole time, I think. I don't know what the future holds, because Hakuho did pull this one out. He did look like he was back. I know Chris was talking as if this was Hakuho's final tournament. I don't know that Hakuho thinks it's his final tournament. I wonder if he, decided based on what the result was going to be, what his future was going to be. That could explain also the pump up at the end. And his wife was crying, and, a lot was riding on this. So I don't know that Hakuho is ready to hang it up yet. And, this is one of those things where, for nostalgia's sake, I love that he might not be done. But for the future's sake, it might not be the best thing. Because his sumo is a little chippier, which I like chippy. I really do. I love Chiyo no Kuni. He's about as chippy as it gets. With that being said, there is a certain aura that a Yokozuna is supposed to display, and Hakuho isn't able to do that in his current condition. He has to do a lot of cheaper kind of moves that maybe a lower ranked guy would do. He doesn't have the I'm just going to beat you power for power in every match, because time is ticking. So, like I said, these are some raw emotions that are coming. I haven't had enough time to really process what this is all going to mean, and I'm sure Chris will do some very good videos and very good justice to the whole situation. So stay tuned for what he has to say. Check out the other guys too, Kintamayama, Jason Sumo, all the guys. Also check out NHK, though they don't usually do much of a wrap-up, but you never know. NHK World might do something in their news program about it. So next we're going to go to Terunofuji, and I want to talk about his tournament, and I want to talk about the possible elbow injury, which is a devastating thing. Let's just hope that was not what it looked like. Terunofuji had one of the most exciting tournaments that we've seen in a very, very long time from somebody who wasn't Hakuho. He looked like a Yokozuna up there. He deserves to be where he is. It's so nice to see somebody come in and do it the way he did it, just calmly, strongly, represent the highest rank in sumo. It sounded like it was pretty much a guarantee that he was going to get promoted once he reached 13 wins, because then that would be the equivalent of a Basho win, considering that he had that extra match in the playoff in the previous, and also he'd be the runner-up no matter what. Him and Hakuho, pretty much from day one, it was going to be one of their tournaments. And so, even though he lost, my God, did he put on one of the most exciting tournaments? Did he put on the most excellent sumo, especially considering his knee situation? And I was very concerned at the end when he was holding his elbow. And that's another thing about the Hakuho situation, is how much more time do we even have with Terunofuji? So I hope that Terunofuji did not get injured in that final match, and now all we have is a limping Hakuho and no brand new Yokozuna. That would be absolutely devastating. So, this tournament may be one of those moments in time that you will always go back to define what the future of sumo is. I give him all the credit in the world. He's probably really, really in a rough place. Losing that match when it was such a hard-fought match and such a hard-fought tournament. And then if it is a serious injury, the anxiety that could come from that when he is supposed to be doing his Yokozuna ceremony. So hopefully the elbow is just a little stung. I really, really hope so. That it's not a major deal. In a couple of days, we'll be getting the Yokozuna promotion, where they'll show up at the door and offer the promotion to him, and then he'll give his speech, and, all the really exciting things that will come from that will hopefully take away the pain of this loss. So no matter what, congratulations to Terunofuji. I hope we are going to have an excellent future with you. I'm glad that if it is an injury, it was at the end of the tournament, and I hope to see a really strong, awesome Terunofuji in September. Now, to some more bummer news would be Takakeisho. I said to my husband right before he went into that tachi with Ichinojo, he's got to watch his neck. He's got to watch his neck. And bam, right away, tachi into Ichinojo's chest. When he fell limp the way he did, I didn't know what happened. I was like, did he have a stroke? Did he have a heart attack? What? I wasn't sure necessarily that it was the neck. And I have to say, I was bummed out for a couple of days. It really took me out of the tournament because a neck injury is a really tricky thing. It's like a back injury. It may heal, but you may never be able to fight the same way again, depending on the injury. And Takakeisho, every time he gets close to that goal, this was a possible Yokozuna run. This was a battle with Terunofuji and Hakuho. Like this was his moment to show what he's got. Every time that happens, he gets injured. And it's the unfortunate side effect of being his size. He's a very short guy with short arms who's also very heavy. He's had to compensate for the height by becoming extra heavy and extra strong. And it's really a difficult thing because I don't know what his future in sumo can be. Like, can he really get to Yokozuna or even keep Ozeki for that matter, because now he's going to be Kataban? Can he really work with the limitations that he has and ascend to the highest rank? It's such a hard thing for him to do, that if he does it, he should be applauded and remembered forever, just for the fighting spirit of it all. But in reality, I don't know. I really don't. It's like a big question mark. The pessimist in me is worried that Takakeisho's never coming back after the neck injury, that he'll try to fight and he won't be the same. The optimist in me says, it's just, he got hurt in the first couple of days, so he's got plenty of time to heal and he'll be back in September and ready for a fight. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I will say this. When Takakeisho's career is over, I am never having a favorite again. I'm just not going to do it. It's too much. I was like in a mourning period for 3 or 4 days, couldn't even enjoy the tournament because I was so devastated. And that's a difficult position to be in when you really like sumo. So after Takakeisho retires, I'm going to refuse to like anybody as much as I like Takakeisho so I can enjoy the sport. So anyway, I wish Takakeisho the best of luck. Healing is really the most important thing, and we're going to see what happens. He's Kataban, which, leads into the situation we are in where the Ozekis are decimated again. Now, I suppose that the Ozeki rank is supposed to be transitional. I mean, your goal is to become Yokozuna, but Ozeki used to be the top rank. So Ozeki does mean a lot. It does matter when there's strong Ozekis. And we're in a really precarious situation because Terunofuji's going to go up. Takakeisho is injured and uncertain. And he's injured all the time. So he's uncertain for that reason, though he deserves to be Ozeki. Strength-wise, fighting spirit, the wins that he's had, the tournaments he's had, he deserves the rank. But he does have an injury problem, so he is an uncertainty. Which brings us to Shodai. Shodai squeaked it out on the last day. And he was in what we would call a Darwin match on the final day with Takayasu. So, boy, you want to talk about a bad state of affairs. Here's two guys who shouldn't be in a Darwin match on the final day. They should be, like, at the top of their game. And we have Shodai, who just had a lackluster struggle session of a tournament, going against Takayasu, who's had some of the hardest losses that I think I've seen in sumo. I'm fairly new to sumo, but still, Takayasu stands out for being the guy who's almost there, and then it all falls apart. And so, he's out. We'll get more into Takayasu. There's a lot to say about that. But Darwin match, both 7-7 on the final day. And Shodai takes it, which he should take it. He's the Ozeki, but he should have never been in that position to begin with. So we have a very, very shaky Ozeki with Shodai. And I think a lot of it is, there's two factors. One is his confidence. His confidence is like a roller coaster, and he's kind of got the Eeyore effect. So when his confidence isn't so good, he's sort of mopey and down and out. But then he sort of flips a switch, and there's angry Shodai, and angry Shodai shows up and just does what he's got to do. The second factor is, one of the things that brought Shodai to where he is his unusual tachi, which is he absorbs the punishment of whoever's coming at him and sort of reflects it back, almost like, some kind of anime character or something. After a while, you take enough blows, and it starts to rattle your cage. So he's taken a lot of vicious blows doing this style of sumo. It's probably affected him physically in a lot of ways. Maybe his head in particular. I know his head isn't what's taking the impact, but just the impact and bracing for it, you're going to get your bell rung quite a few times. Now, I'm not saying that I think he has an injury or anything like that. I'm just saying it's a very punishing way to go about your sumo career, and that might be why we're starting to see 8-7s. He sort of has a Takakeisho thing where, what he lacks, he tries to make up for in, well, just beat me up and I'll win in the end. But that's a rough way to go about being the top guy, because everybody's gunning for you all the time. So there's no off day for an Ozeki. So we're going to have to see, does Shodai have another gear? Does Shodai have some tricks to get through a tournament without getting too beat down either emotionally or physically? There's really no way to tell until the next tournament. I mean, he hung in there, but he certainly wasn't somebody who you were thinking about when you're watching Hakuho and Terunofuji tear it up. So next we have, the saddest state of affairs, Asanoyama. This is his last time as Ozeki on the official rankings chart. And we've beaten this topic to death about Asanoyama, but I'll make 2 points on it. One being that this tournament specifically shows you how much it mattered that Asanoyama got demoted. Let's say even if he just got a slap on the wrist and got kicked out of Ozeki, even that is a big deal, because the Ozekis are in a sad state. So we have an uncertain Takakeisho, an uncertain Shodai, and a Terunofuji who's leaving, and Asanoyama was perfectly healthy, perfectly fine, positioned to be the next top guy, and now he's just gone for no good reason. So it's a bummer. I'm glad I'm not going to have to talk about it next tournament, because, he's going to just slowly fade out, and eventually he'll come out of the conversation. And I'm looking forward to talking about him again when he is in a more positive situation and he's on the way up, versus almost seeing like the rest in peace symbol above his name every time I see him on the rankings chart, knowing that he's not going to keep that spot either. The other note that I'll make is I would highly recommend, if you haven't already watched it, to watch the NHK World preview show They really went in depth on the Asanoyama situation, which is something they don't typically do. They don't go into opinions super often, but this situation warranted it. And they had three guys take three different opinions, which I thought was nice and balanced. I'm sure it was intentional, but I do believe that was their opinions. There was Hiro on one end, there was Ross in the middle, and then there was John Gunning at the end, which I love John Gunning. He's probably my favorite, but Murray Johnson is very, very close. But, Hiro took the absolutely unacceptable route. Ross took the unacceptable, but, he was put in a tough position. And John took the position of, he should have never been in that position to begin with. And all of them made excellent points, so it is worth it to go and listen to the preview show to sort of get an idea of what the thoughts are in Japan. And John is an Irish guy, so while he's in Japan, he also has sort of the foreigner perspective. He's like the token foreigner. So anyway, I recommend checking that out, and you should do that soon because they don't leave the preview up for long. Sumo's in and out on the NHK World on-demand schedule. So I recommend going to check that out very quickly if you want to hear their perspective. Okay. Now to Takayasu, which, it's hard to talk about him because he's had some of the hardest losses in sumo in the last couple of years. He's out for 2 days, makes a nice strong return that, if he wins it all the way through, and you knew he'd have trouble at the end with the top guys, but if he could beat everybody else, he could prove that he deserves to stay on his Ozeki run. And what happens is, he loses his first two. Ichinojo is on fire. I mean, what can you do about that? I'm sorry. I'm screwing this up. Early morning. He beats Ichinojo, he beats Endo, and then he loses to a very, very fired up Meisei. Beats Daieisho, loses to Takanosho, which is real iffy because Takanosho is a pretty iffy guy right now, but he's a strong fighter. Comes back, beats Mitakeumi, Hokutofuji, Wakatakakage, Tobizaru. It's starting to look real, real good. And then loses the final four. Now, Kiribayama is a nice up-and-coming fighter. We'll get more into him later. Hakuho is Hakuho. Terunofuji, he had a good shot of beating him, but Terunofuji was on a mission. And then Shodai, Shodai's an Ozeki. I mean, he should win that fight, though he could have beaten Shodai. So that puts you in the situation where he couldn't afford the losses to Meisei, Takanosho, and Kiribayama. If he just takes one of those matches, he at least stays as Sekiwake. So now he's off the Ozeki run and he's out of Sekiwake. And it's just like, ugh, oh man. Like you went from, okay, this is okay, we're going to float up top, to just a complete crash at the end. So, I have sympathies for him. I think he works really hard. I think he has one of the greatest hearts in sumo. And every time I'm just going to hope that he's going to fight his way back again. Because the mental and the heart struggles for Takayasu are just, they're compounded by his back issues that have been lingering for years. And a back is something that just doesn't heal the way other things do. You can have back problems for the rest of your life. So I wish him the best. I really, really hope that this is going to be the last time we see the slow walk of Takayasu. And, we'll see where he lies. I mean, he could drop down to Komusubi and take Wakatakakage's spot. I certainly hope that they give him that because he only, he got a 7 and 8. He has to start the Ozeki run all over again, but at least he's in Sanyaku. I mean, this is going to be a hard fight back for him, but at least he did make it back to Sanyaku. So end on a positive note. I don't want this to be a total doom and gloom session here. Of course, then Mitakeumi's next, so I have to go back to doom a little bit. So, I've ragged on Mitakeumi enough. I don't really enjoy it. He's 8-7. I'm going to sum up his entire tournament by his final match with Wakatakakage. He's just not hungry enough. He's a salary man. Put on his suit every day, get on the subway, go to work, clock in, clock out, go home. Wakatakakage was 4-9, I think. He had nothing to gain. I mean, he unfortunately, and he's next on the list. We'll go into it. He hit the grind of first-time Sanyaku, which is, it is what it is. That didn't stop him from not only turning the tides on the rope against Mitakeumi, but beating him in pretty convincing fashion. And Mitakeumi didn't offer much resistance. It was almost as if it's like, well, I got my Kachikoshi, so I guess I lost. He's just watch that match. I don't really have much more to say besides watch that match. That sums up Mitakeumi's career for me. Now, I didn't see him before he reached Sanyaku, a little bit. But I didn't know his body of work leading up to Sanyaku, but it's almost like he climbed the ladder, he got into a comfortable management position, and that's where he's going to stay. So, take it as it is. If he's cool with it, he's cool with it. He's still one of the top guys in sumo. He's making money. He's doing his thing. But I don't think he's ever going to be Ozeki. I think he's going to stay exactly where he is until he, crashes out from either old age or injury or the things that knock a guy, out of his spot, as is the way of sumo. So, next we have Wakatakakage. I want to be positive on him. He did finish 5-10. He's gonna drop. They could be generous. You never know, but I expect him to drop quite a few rungs with a 5-10. But this is hardly unexpected. I mean, I expected a little bit more from him simply because I'm calling him the next great hope and all this. But the reality sets in, and it is his first time in Sanyaku, and you get all your tough matches. It's a grind. It's plays with your psyche a little bit because you feel like you've got to be the top guy now that you're in Sanyaku. And I thought he fought really hard. I don't think he phoned it in at all. It's just he wasn't ready. He was outmatched. And I think he will sort of take the experience of being in Sanyaku and he'll work his way up. I wouldn't be shocked to see some sort of 12-3 next time. That being said, that's with me assuming that he's up to par and this was just, him taking his lumps. I'm going to assume that at this point, especially with that final day Mitakeumi win, that really shows you that the fire's there, the hunger's there, and he'll be back. As long as everything stays good in the world, he'll be back, and I predict good things for him. And I'm excited for that. Next, we have my dark horse from way back. I've been predicting Meisei to be a star since he first came into the upper division because he had some really, really great tournaments where he was just getting these amazing records, and then injuries hit him. He wound up in Juryo. He kind of floundered and disappeared. So he finally made it to Komusubi. This was his debut as well. And this was really a roller coaster tournament. He, loses to who he's supposed to lose to with Hakuho, and Hokutofuji was looking very good at first. Gets that Fusensho with Takakeisho's injury, which is the difference. He got really lucky there. That is the difference between a Makikoshi and a Kachikoshi. Loses to Ichinojo and then takes a match with Takayasu, which devastating for his situation. takes one from salaryman Mitakeumi, loses to Wakatakakage. Now, that was a big match because here's the future of sumo. Now, Meisei's a little bit further ahead of Wakatakakage in experience and tournaments under his belt. So, this was sort of like a test. Where are you really at? So, Waka taking that match was really good for him and a little bit of a step back for Meisei. Meisei beats Daieisho. Meisei loses to Shodai. Now, he should lose to Shodai, but Shodai is sort of, he's not in the right headspace for Ozeki at this point. So that's a hard one to lose. Beats Takanosho, beats my poor friend, Kotoeko. Loses to Terunofuji. That was a really hard fought match. He did what he could do. I had a lot of respect for him just going head in, and, he lost the match, but it showed some good possible paths for him in the future. He beat Kiribayama, who's an up-and-comer, so that sort of washes out the Wakatakakage, because I sort of look at them all in the same tier. Loses to Ura, who had an amazing comeback, and I'll get to him. And then beats Kageyaki on the last day in that Darwin match that was a really hard one to watch. That was one of my, oh, no, we're not doing this, are we? Because Kageyaki has just had such a struggle and such a hard time. So I didn't really want to root for Meisei or Kageyaki, but I really wanted, because I didn't want Kageyaki to lose, but I didn't want Meisei to lose his Komusubi spot. So that was a really hard one. And I'm happy that Meisei won, but sad that Kageyaki lost. Next, we're going to go to Endo, and this really was the tournament. I mean, it's almost like a destiny tournament where the only option that was allowed was Hakuho and Terunofuji clean all the way through to the end to see who was the top guy, because Endo too was taken out by injury. Now, Endo has been on shaky ground, I think, as far as injury territory. I think he doesn't speak about it much. So maybe this wasn't a big surprise in his world. It was a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting him to end up that way. But that might explain why you have this super talented college Yokozuna with all of these tricks, all of these flashy moves, the heart, a very passionate fan base who just can't seem to make it into Sanyaku and above when I think he has all the tools to do so. Injury is probably a factor. And, if he's had reoccurring injuries that maybe I'm not aware of, that affects your mental state as well. I mean, how do you get up every tournament and say, well, now this tournament I don't feel good? What motivates you to keep going when your body isn't working properly? So, that was a bummer too. The two guys who made the last tournament interesting, Endo and Takakeisho, were not going to be a factor. And, it's unfortunate. And it's the thing that John and I always talk about, where such an awesome sport, but it's such a combat sport. It's so high impact that injuries can throw everything in upheaval all the time. You just get comfortable and excited about a situation, and then bam, somebody's injured. Which, once again, Terunofuji, I really hope that's not where we're at. So, rest up, Endo. I really hope you've got more in the tank. You really did give us a great tournament last time, and I really hope that's not the last that we saw of that Endo. But, positive vibes. Hoping that it's not a big deal. Okay, so now we go to Daieisho. So I guess like I said, this is going to be more like a reaction recap because I just finished watching the tournament. It's the wee hours of the morning. I haven't been able to really collect my whole thoughts of this tournament. So I'm going to be up and down. One minute I'm like, this is the worst tournament ever. And the next minute, no, but there's hope. So this is going to be a little bit of a frantic one. John's tomorrow will probably be much tighter, and he will have had time to really process what this whole tournament means. Daieisho had a collapse, effectively. He went 5-10. This is somewhat standard for him. I mean, he goes from winning the tournament to just, dropping out of Sanyaku. Now he's going to drop out of Maegashira 1. He's going to fall pretty low, is my guess. Maybe, let's see. Let's look at the other guys here. Well, they could drop him to Tobizaru's spot. He might only drop to Maegashira 3 or 4. 3, 4, and 5 are all available, so maybe the fall won't be that bad. It depends on their mood, of course. There is math involved, but I don't understand it because there is this sort of political community aspect to it that somebody can just come in and say, I don't like that rank because that throw on day 5 really sucked, so he's going down lower than we would typically put him. I'm not there, so I can't be involved in those discussions. But I'm guessing somewhere between Maegashira 3, 4, or 5 is where he'll land because of that 5th win on the last day. I'd say Daieisho, there's probably a couple of things. One being that he does push sumo. And the thing about push sumo is, some people absolutely hate it because they think it's boring. I think Daieisho makes it far more interesting than some because he's got a range of motion and he can kind of do some things on the edge. He's not relying completely on, I need to blast you out in 5 seconds like Takakeisho. I still love Takakeisho regardless. But with that being said, push sumo is so difficult because if anything's lacking, you've only got this one move. So if your power's off, if you're injured, if your head's just a little shaky and you don't get the tachi-ai off right, you wind up with a 5-10 because it snowballs. You get one loss and then you try to tweak something the next day and that tweak was a bad choice and then you lose the next day and then it starts getting into your head like, oh, what's going on? You change other things and then it just keeps snowballing and snowballing and then you really can't get your momentum and you lose a whole tournament over very small things. Also, push sumo is very hard on the body. If you look on Daieisho, all his fingers are broken. If they're not broken, they're sprained. He's starting to get the Kotoyuki claw. He takes a lot of blows to the head doing this push style because, you hit somebody in the head, they hit you back. It's, the mirror neurons start firing. So you're going to take more of a beating as a push sumo guy just simply because if somebody comes into your game, then it's like a knockout brawl instead of a sumo match. So he's probably beat up on top of like things just not going his way. The plus side is after a fall, you can sort of regroup because if you're on a certain level, you're better than the guys you're fighting and you can work your way back up. And I guess that's sumo's version of, being on the bench. It's like, just go fight the guys you can beat and try to heal while you do that. Because you can't take a day off in sumo or you lose everything. So I wish Daieisho the best. It's hardly unexpected that he's in this situation. I expect him to drop down. Hopefully that drop down will be the level that he's comfortable in and he will make another rise. Get a little bit of healing and, start all over again. Next we have Takanosho, and John and I have been predicting for a while that he was playing the salaryman that Mitakeumi was playing. But with him being a new up-and-coming fighter, that wasn't necessarily the same situation. Like, was he hanging in Sanyaku with 8 and 7s until he got, like, his burst of energy, his burst of power, and then he was going to just mow people over? Or was he the 8 and 7 because that was his ceiling and the best that he could do? I think we're kind of getting a picture here where Takanosho is missing that extra power that he needs. So he's another push sumo guy, though he probably could transition to some belt techniques. He's got long enough arms. He's got enough movement. But there is always the question of, do you try to do a bunch of different tricks mediocrely, or do you do the one thing really well? So should he try to learn belt techniques, or should he just keep trying to bulk up his power and be the best push sumo guy he can be? It's a tough position to be in when push sumo is your thing and you have to make that choice. There are plenty of wrestlers throughout the years who were push sumo guys, and then they started trying different things and they transitioned into something else. So we'll see with Takanosho. I think he has the ability to do that. He doesn't have physical limitations that make it like, yeah, he's not Takakeisho. But it is always a risk to do it. And right now with him being Maegashira 2, is this the time to try to mess around with your style? I don't know. I will say that I thought he fought hard. I thought he tried really hard. I do think he's missing the extra power. He's missing some oomph, so to speak. He's starting to look a little bit generic push sumo without like that special spark. He's still young. He's got time. But he was in a final day Darwin match as well. Which, talk about another Darwin match that I wasn't excited about. So Takanosho on the final day was with versus Chiyonokuni. And just in case you don't know what I'm talking about, a Darwin match is a 7-7 Makekoshi, Kachikoshi situation. So Takanosho was fighting Chiyonokuni on the final day, and Chiyonokuni, I love him. It was hard for him to come back up to the upper division after all this time, and he lost, which, I'm happy to see Takanosho win because I do like him. But Chiyonokuni is probably headed down to Juryo at this point. Tough loss on the final day. I thought he did what he could do, but Takanosho won justifiably, and I hope the future's looking bright for Takanosho, and this is just, he's a steady guy. He's just going to steadily do his thing. So next we have Ichinojo, and I have such mixed feelings about Ichinojo right now. I've always been a fan because he's the big guy in sumo. I think that's awesome. And he also has a personality, even though he has such a weird up and down way of doing sumo. For the longest time, it's like, is Sleepy Ichinojo showing up today? Or is like the beast, the monster of Grand Sumo showing up today? The last couple of tournaments, he's been a totally different guy, and I have no idea what changed for him. I would love to know the secret sauce. He suddenly got speed, and he suddenly got desire, and those were two things he never had up until probably 2 tournaments ago, where he's a hockey term. I don't know if anybody's a hockey fan on here. He's finishing his checks. He used to be the guy who would just sort of tap you, and then you might fall into the boards, or you might, bounce right off of him. Now he is flattening you into the boards. And that Ichinojo has not existed prior to the last 2 tournaments as far as I had ever seen. So, I'm happy about that on one hand, but of course, on the other hand, he is a major, major obstacle for Takakeisho and, some other guys as well, because he is a mountain of a man to climb. In Takakeisho's case, and I know I'm biased, I know this has nothing to do with sumo as a whole, but hey, I'm just giving my opinion. 42 opinions. I don't know how Takakeisho is ever going to overcome him because of his own limitations. What he has is push sumo. What he has is a strong hitcha with a head tachi-ai. He cannot do that against Ichinojo. And let's say he even tries it again. He's been injured by Ichinojo twice in the neck area doing the exact same thing. So he's either going to have to do something that I really, really dislike and said I would never, ever support, which is a hanka or a not fully engaged battle. But it's better than losing your career running into a brick wall. I mean, maybe Takakeisho has to pull an Ashitori leg pick or something. I have no idea, but that would be the downside to Ichinojo, is he's a major obstacle for my guy, and I don't like it. Can't help it. I just don't like it. And I hope he didn't just end Takakeisho's career. With that being said, 10-5, he is going to go into Sanyaku. I don't know that he is the most liked as far as... I don't know if we're talking favoritism here or whatever. I know Hakuho does not like him. Might be a Mongolian thing. But I also think that there's a lot of people in the Yokozuna Deliberation Council that don't like Hakuho. So, maybe they'll, do it with joy on their faces. Put him up there very happily. I mean, because technically speaking... And this would be shady. They could just put him in Daieisho's spot. I have seen them do shady things to Ichinojo in the past. That's why I'm saying I don't know, if he's on the list of people that you just don't give things to. But we will see. He should be in Sanyaku next time around. If we're throwing all conspiracy theories aside. He should be taking Wakatakakage... He should be taking Wakatakakage's place, which would make sense. 10-5 for a 5-10. Maybe they'll do an exact switcheroo. I don't know. Next, we have Hokutofuji, and he finished with an 8-7. He lost on the final day to Hoshoryu. I'm glad he got an 8-7, but he was not himself. I'm not really sure what went wrong. I don't know if he's injured. I don't know if... He's been tweaking a lot himself with, he was a push guy only, but he was like a really explosive push guy who could really track well. And if he had to do something else, he could. He sort of went into the territory of doing some more belt and some different things. This is where that can sometimes really screw you up, because if you change your style of sumo, not to be generic, but it really does mean something. If you change your style of sumo and then you get inconsistent results, then you tend to do a lot of changing and you continue to get inconsistent results. So you could have this amazing tournament doing your hodgepodge of things, but then you don't know how to make that work the next tournament because either luck isn't on your side or just one little thing goes different. And let's not forget that, every other guy could just be having a great tournament and, you lost because you lost. So, he had some really lopsided defeats, especially the one against Tamawashi. He just picked him up by the throat and choke slammed him like he was the Undertaker or something. So, I don't know. I feel like something was off with Hokutofuji. I hope it wasn't anything that is a lingering situation, like maybe it was a life thing. Something's going on and his head wasn't in it. I hope it's not an injury. I'm always hoping things are not injuries because they ruin everything, as you can see in this tournament. So I'm just going to call it a one-off for now. He squeaked by with his 8-7. That's good for him. He's probably poised to take the Myogiryu 1 spot. That's my guess. He'll either take Endo's or Daieisho's. Unless, actually, he could take the Myogiryu 2 if they decide to just bump him up 1 because he had the 8-7. We'll have to see what they do. Next, we will go to Tobizaru. So many interesting things. When I first sat down writing my notes over the tournament to decide how to approach the Tobizaru conversation, yesterday kind of blew that up. So everybody's got an opinion. I'll give mine. You can give your opinions in the comment section below because I'd love to know what everybody thinks about this topic. So when Tobizaru faced Hakuho on, let's see, day 7, He did the crazy all the way back in the Shikiri-sen. Didn't engage him in a tachi-ai. It was kind of silly, kind of slapstick. And there were such strong opinions about it. Some people thought it was silly and fun. We need that. And some people were like, this is a disgrace to sumo. How could he dare do that? Well, what are those people saying now when Hakuho does that on day 14 as a yokozuna right in front of his day 15 opponent just for kicks? And that's something that I'll mention again with Chiyoshoma. Maybe I'm a little too hard on Hakuho right now because it is a reaction type video at this point. But, Hakuho sets certain standards. He really does. And I can't say that Tobizaru knew that Hakuho would pull that or that he had that in mind. But I thought initially when Tobizaru did it, it wasn't a big deal because Hakuho does a lot of cheap stuff. He comes in, he slaps you in the face. I don't know if you guys realize this, but it's the equivalent of a sucker punch, really. Now, at this point, everybody knows Hakuho is going to do it. But still, he slaps you so that it stings you so hard. His slap is gonna feel like getting hit by a truck, not like your friend who slaps you in the face. He slaps you so that you're so stung that he can grab your belt, and it's kind of cheap. It really is. I don't like to point it out much because I like Hakuho, at least enough to appreciate his, legacy and everything else, and I don't root against people typically. But, Hakuho pulls all kinds of cheap tricks. He did something to he almost knocked Endo out a couple years ago with a forearm on the tachi-ai. So if Hakuho can slap people and forearm them, why can't Tobizaru go way back in the Shikiri-sen and not get punched in the face? He knows Hakuho is leaps and bounds ahead of him. Why would he do it to himself? It doesn't make sense to me. So for anybody who thought that was a disgrace, I wonder if you think it's a disgrace now when Hakuho pulls the same thing and he didn't need to. He did it because he feels like it. Tobizaru was kind of making the smart move, if you ask me, and I was entertained by it. There are parallels between sumo and professional wrestling, and, Japan has one of the great professional wrestling circuits. And in professional wrestling, though fake, there is an element of entertainment that kind of tweaks itself. It's very appealing to the Japanese culture. So if you do it in a tasteful way, it's kind of fun. It's like, let's throw off the shackles of this system that's got so many rules and have a little fun for once. Just don't take it overboard. And that's what I thought Tobizaru was doing. I saw nothing wrong with it. Certainly, if you did see something wrong with it, you must be freaking out what Hakuho did. Which, I meant to mention that when I was talking about Hakuho. I think he did that because he really was playing psychological games with Terunofuji. He wanted Terunofuji to be like, okay, Hakuho is capable of anything. And maybe try to weaken his tachi-ai a little bit because then Terunofuji wouldn't want to fully engage in case Hakuho pulls a stunt. That's the Hakuho we have now is, win at all costs. He doesn't have it in him to win the way he used to. So it is what it is. I don't know how much of a stance I really want to take on it beyond I thought Tobizaru was very entertaining in that Hakuho match. And I think he's entertaining win or loss. He really is the flying monkey. He flies further than any guy in that dohyo. Even in a win, he's flying out of the ring. And he's full of spunk, he's full of personality, and sumo needs some personality. You can't have every guy be like Mr. Serious, stoic, represent Japan. Come on, we gotta have some silly guys. So, I like Tobizaru. I do think he's way outmatched at Maegashira 3, which is why, them pulling the weird rankings and they gave him a second chance, I guess, but I don't think he's getting another one after this. He's going to drop pretty low, I believe, and that's probably where he belongs. I'd love for him to prove me wrong, but I have all the respect. He's been in Juryo a very long time, He hasn't been in the top division that long, and, you know, he may have hit his ceiling. So he's got to do what he's got to do to just stay where he's at and have a good time and entertain us at the same time. So next we have my friend Kotoeko, who I love, but he is another guy who is out of his depth. He went 2-13, and it was the strangest 2-13 because I really thought he was trying his hardest the whole time, outputting everything that he had. I didn't think he was phoning it in. I didn't think he looked injured. I just don't think he's good enough to be Myogiryu 4. And I believe it's because he is lacking in power. He looks powerful. He's got a nice looking body, nice and chiseled, and he looks like the kind of guy who can do sumo. He doesn't have the weight. He can't push people around the way everybody else can. And I think that's what you see with Takakeisho. These sort of smaller guys have only one of two choices. You either really, really quick and you like grab the mawashi and do an enho and swing you around in circles or pick your leg, or you get really, really big, like bigger than your frame can handle, because these guys are huge. So Kotoeko has this like Herculean task of trying to push out these guys who are so much bigger than him, and he just doesn't have the power for it. It's a dilemma that I don't know the answer to, because if you do what Takakeisho does and get so heavy, you know, you have other problems and maybe even long-term health problems from that. So Kotoeko might be pigeonholed into, you know, a guy who's good enough for the upper division, but not good enough to really ascend to the greater heights. I hope that's not the case, but I am kind of starting to phone it in a little bit on him. I still love him. I'm still going to root for him, but I'm taking him off of my Rising Stars list or Dark Horse list and putting him in the, you know, the character guy, the cool guy, the guy you want to root for kind of guy. Next we have Chiyotairyu, and he was 4-11. This was a disaster of a tournament for him. I think he did put on some more weight after losing weight. And this is yet again another situation where you change something with your style of sumo and everything else could possibly fall apart. He loses weight, which is really good for him. Gets him more speedy, better for your health. He probably feels a lot better. And you lose the power. So then you've got to change the way you do sumo. Then you gain a little bit more weight. Maybe you got a little bit more power, but now you're not strong as you used to be, and now you've got the extra weight that isn't doing you any favors. He is probably towards the end of his career at this point, so I don't know how much tweaking he wants to do. I mean, maybe it's better to lose the weight and just sort of, like, some of these guys are still fighting because they're looking for elder stock. They can't retire until other guys retire. So if it's a situation like that where he just needs to, you know, keep going until there's a spot for him, then maybe it's okay to just, you know, start losing the weight and go around in Juryo. He's certainly talented enough to do it. But he's going to have to make some tough choices going forward, I think. But luckily he has the experience, so he's got the ability to turn this around and at least stay in the upper division. But it's going to take some work and some deep pondering, I would say. Next, we have Okinoumi, who was 5-10. Really, this was a case of being injured, being older. And John and I have talked about this a bunch of times where, you know, you hit a certain age and it is what it is. You might still have the skill set to be an upper division guy, a top guy, but your body just can't do the grind anymore. And it was only a matter of time for Okinoumi before that would really start to become an issue. I don't know if this is the tournament that it is an issue. I really don't know. I don't want to speculate either, but I wouldn't be surprised either way. It sounds like he had a knee injury that's going to be harder to recover from. He fought on long and tough. He did his thing. And I'm just hoping that, if he's still fighting for that reason, to get his elder stock, that he doesn't have much more time to go. That's my hope for him. If he's fighting because he wants to fight, well, then I hope you can fight for as long as you want to fight. So next we have sort of the breakout star, the surprise but not surprise in Hoshoryu. Hoshoryu, we have been predicting to be, he's going to be the guy at some point. He's young. He's like 21. So like he's the next great hope. But he was looking so very green in his first couple of tournaments. And I don't know if it was just the pressure of living up to his uncle's name, or, maybe it's because he just takes it so seriously. I would guess that sumo is a very, very serious thing in his family. And that can really get in your head, and you can really beat yourself up. If anybody had any doubts, he certainly showed in this tournament that he is the next guy that's coming up. And if he stays healthy, he will be a force to be reckoned with. I mean, he has a lot of different tricks in the bag, and he's got a lot of fire and passion. And I don't want to just throw Wakatakakage out the window because he didn't, perform the way I expected, but he sort of did the flip-flop where I thought Wakatakakage was just going to ascend. And Hoshoryu was just going to just slowly acclimate into the system. And they did a reversal where Hoshoryu comes out of nowhere and it's like, here I am. And Wakatakakage started to look normal. So, he's going to get a bump. Probably going to take the 2 spot is my guess. I'm guessing he's going to take Ichinojo's spot. He looked really good. And he would be the one reason why I would want to see Hakuho fight another tournament, because Hoshoryu would get an opportunity to fight him. And I think it would be a very special moment for Hakuho and Hoshoryu because of all the years of battling that Hakuho and Asashoryu had. I mean, it would be somewhat of a tribute. And I could just picture drunk uncle in the audience watching that match. I think that would actually be a treat. I think it would be treated very specially. I think it would be treated very respectfully. Because Hoshoryu is rising up. He's like obviously the underdog. He's not on Hakuho's level, and this would be like his chance to fight a Yokozuna. And not only a Yokozuna, but the one his uncle battled with for years. So, very, very exciting, positive news about Hoshoryu. I hope we get that opportunity to see him fight Hakuho. If not, either way, we're going to have, barring those injuries, got all my fingers crossed here, we have somebody very exciting coming up when we have a lot of trouble up at the top. And I'd love to see him just tear it up. Him, Wakatakakage, Kiribayama, be the future. We need to see the future. So next we have Onosho, who's always been the enigma. He can look so lackluster sometimes. And then he can just come out and be like this little bowling ball of energy and oomph. And that's basically the case here where, he wasn't... He was a roller coaster. Win-loss, 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 win-loss. Looked real good on the final day against Terunofuji, and you ask yourself, why weren't you like that the whole tournament? That's usually something you see in week 1, and if you didn't see it in week 2, it's because the guy's tired. How do you pull off such a complete win on the final day to only get a 7 and 8? Why couldn't you have done that a couple days earlier and then have your Kachikoshi? I don't know. You have the push sumo factor. You have the, he's got the chaotic, unstable footwork situation, and maybe he's just too excited. Maybe it's some sort of internal thing, and he just gets himself into trouble. But we're gonna see. Every tournament is this an oh no show, or is this a oh no show? We will find out in September. Next, we have Kiribayama, the next great hope. he earned his 9-6, but I'll say that I was really surprised to see his record at the end because it was an up and down tournament for him as well. It was a hard fought 9-6 that felt more like a 7-8 or an 8-7. There were times where he looked absolutely brilliant. Like, this is the guy. Yes, he's finally showing up. And then times where it's like, ooh, he just got outmanned. Ooh. Young person jitters. You know, trying to tweak the things that need to be tweaked. I'm assuming Kakadu is spending a lot of time with him now, so that can only get better is my guess. And that would probably reflect the 9-6, is that he's always had this up and down kind of thing where you saw flashes of brilliance and then he would lose the next 3 matches. So maybe the X factor is Kakadu is sitting down with him and showing him, okay, I watched the tape. In this moment, you know, you pulled or you shifted. You know, whatever those little things that he needs to tweak are, can take that 9-6, and then maybe he's, I mean, it isn't that different from a 10-5, but I felt like Kiribayama and Hoshoryu's tournaments were entirely different. But in the grand scheme of things, a win is a win and a loss is a loss. So when you go back in time and take a look at this, you'll say, oh wow, Kiribayama was right there with Hoshoryu. And that'll all depend on where Kiribayama actually is in the rankings. You know, as I said before, this might be the tournament you go back and look at and say, wow, this was the makings of the future. This was going to tell the tale of sumo for the next 10 to 20 years. So, you know, at the end of the day, that record isn't going to mean a whole lot. So next we have Myogiryu, 5-10. Showing his age. It's finally getting to him like Okinoumi. They've kind of been a pair in a sense of, you know, 2 very similar aged veterans with a lot of experience, a lot of, you know, sumo elder status, who, you know, sort of like the elder statesmen who have this pride and this standard that they want the young guys to follow up with. And it does seem like his time might be coming to an end where he can live up to such standards. But we'll see. I mean, injuries are a factor. Rest is a factor. Very similar notes to Okinoumi in that, you know, you're only as good as your next tournament. So you could just take this 5-10 and it was hot. We were in a new gymnasium. Bad luck. Move on. Next we have Chiyoshoma, who was quite an interesting tale. He was way better than A, I expected, but B, than he's been in a while. And it was a little surprising to me because, you know, I was throwing him in the Myogiryu, Okinoumi area where it's like, okay, well, he's got some cool tricks, but he's an older guy, so what can he really do at Maegashira 7? You know, I expected him actually to get better than an 8-7 because he was fighting really, really well. And he was doing all his different tricks. He did throw a hanka in there, but, you know you're getting that from Chiyoshoma. You know you're getting that. He really showed a lot of versatility. A lot of, you know, his foxy tricks, you know, some throws, some pivots, some aggression when he needed to get aggressive, which that surprised me. I was like, whoa, he's got some passion here. I didn't love the face slap on the final day with Ura, especially because it looked like he rung his bell. Now, we all do need to take personal responsibility, but I will throw out there that, you know, Hakuho does set the standard. If you've got the top guy slapping people around, it kind of gets in your head a little bit, like, why don't I give it a shot? And Ura was a tough match. I mean, Ura's his own version of, you know, he's a bigger version of Chiyoshoma with all the different tricks he can pull. So Chiyoshoma probably just really wanted to get his Kachikoshi, and he's like, well, why don't I do that? You know, the precedent is set. It's something we can do. So I was really shocked when he did that, but I also understand he won his Kachikoshi and he fought hard, and I just don't expect to see him do that again. That's not really him. And I'm glad that he did get rewarded for having a really good tournament. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do a little bit higher up. See if he's still really... That's going to be the real test. You really got it, Chiyoshoma. You're starting to look like a much younger man than you are. And I'm here for it. Next we have Takarafuji, who is, one of the classics of sumo. I do think age is getting to him. I do think there's probably some injuries. He's had years and years of really tough battles. It's starting to wear on him a little bit. He started off really, really rough, but then he just slowly did his thing, stable Takarafuji, and he managed to eke out an 8-7, but he looked pretty battered at the end. I mean, Ichinojo took care of him like it was nothing. I do think we're starting to see an actual decline in Takarafuji because it's been steady. He did get an 8-7, but I think his body is beat up. And maybe his soul's a little beat up too. It's a hard grind. So, we'll see. We'll see how long he grinds it out. I know he has a new baby as well, so he's got a very active life, and he has lots of reasons to fight, and he has lots of reasons to try to achieve the elder stock. So I think he can hang in, but he's probably getting kind of tired. He's the guy with the Iron Man matches who hangs in the whole time, takes on the toughest guys, and he's probably... I'm sure he loves sumo, but he's probably not going to be upset when it's time to relax a little bit. Next we have Aoiyama. I wish John was here to talk about it. I'm sure he was disappointed with the 7-8, but hey, it was a 7-8. It was looking like it was going to be way worse than that. He lost 4 in a row, and then he came back and won his last 3 to get that 7-8. He sort of beat down a very beaten down Kaisei on the last day. I don't know what to say about him because nothing really changed besides maybe the injury. Maybe the injury last tournament really screwed up his rhythm. I don't know how he managed to have such a crazy, January and then go right back to this Aoiyama. I mean, it could be that he's Myogiryu 8. It was weird, though. He's such a powerful man that it's surprising when he loses the way that he lost a couple times. So, yeah, I don't know. There's not much I can say about him. I usually defer him to John because John analyzes him more. So I would look for John's show, which should be airing either tomorrow, 7:19, or early Tuesday, 7:20. So for you Aoiyama fans, stay tuned. Hidenoumi is next. Myogiryu 9 also went 7-8. I think that 7-8 is very indicative of his ceiling. I do think he rose about as high as he can rise. I mean, he was in Juryo for a while. And he made a real good run of it in that first tournament excitement in a long time. And, I just think the 7-8 is indicative of he's up too high and he needs to go down a little bit lower and see, what he can make of his career at this point. I feel that he might be towards the end as well. Next up, we have Shimanoumi, who was sort of fighting for hometown pride. And, he fought really hard. He had a lot of good, tough matches. Especially his match with Chiyonokuni. he earned his 8 and 7 for sure. I was actually thinking that he was going to wind up with a 7 and 8. I would flip Shimanoumi and Hidenoumi if I were to predict what was going to happen. But he showed a lot of passion, a lot of fire, a lot of like wins on the edge. He's not done yet. He has something to prove, and he certainly wanted to prove it. I bet you he had family and friends in the crowd, or at the very least they were nearby and could, chat with him. So, I think he did what he had to do to get that 8 and 7, but I'm sure he would have rather have done much better than he did. And I think, let's see, he'll probably rise up to... They might do a Maegashira 8 or a Maegashira 7. You can take 7 or 8. So he's not going to change that much. And I think we're going to see a better version of him in September. He seems to be rising up versus declining. So, let's keep an eye out on him. Next we have Tamawashi, who was one of the biggest surprises of the tournament. I don't know what happened to him, but the last couple tournaments, he was fighting well, but he wasn't winning. And it was weird because it's like, it doesn't look like he's hurt. Like, what's going on with him? And all of a sudden, he came out so incredibly aggressive. It was startling to me. Now, he's always had this aggressive style that sort of hides in the wings. Like, he does a lot of kotanages. He's broken some elbows. He does the nodowa where he grabs you by the throat. I mean, he choke slammed Hokutofuji to the point where he was, like, checking on him afterwards and, like, apologizing. I don't know what fired him up, but, man, he was the guy who won the tournament a couple years ago. And I was, like, starting to write him off, like, aging veteran, put him on the Hidenoumi, Okinoumi list. And he was like, nah, I'm going to just come in here and pop you one. And he, on the final day, he had an opportunity to get the Fighting Spirit Prize, which, if you don't know, that's like $20,000 in cash that you get if you get a Fighting Spirit Prize. And I don't want to get too into conspiracies, but let's just say if tradition serves, Tobizaru did not play along. Tobizaru had absolutely nothing to lose, and he took that match off of Tamawashi and cost him 20 grand. So now that's the way it should be, but the rumblings that I can't deny or confirm are that would be not cool. I don't know if Tobizaru is like now on a list somewhere where like nobody likes him because of what he did with Hakuho, and now Tamawashi got robbed out of $20,000. I don't know. That's just a little fun conspiracy work. The point is, Tobizaru did crush him on the last day, which was so unfortunate for Tamawashi. He ends with 11-4. But hey, I mean, maybe this sparked something in him, and maybe we're going to get another one. I mean, in tournaments past, Tamawashi would have been talked about a lot more with that record. We'll put it that way. Next, we have Terunofuji, 8-7. He did really good in the second week. The first week, he just, I don't know. He's such an up and down guy because I think he is, another one of those guys who has all these tricks and doesn't know which one to pull. It's almost like he goes in without a plan. And maybe that's what all sumo guys do, but maybe he goes in with a plan and the plan just fails a lot of days. But he looked really good in the second week. And I can't help but think he was extra pumped up by the fact that he got to be sword bearer for Hakuho this tournament. It seems like something that, he was giving Midori Fuji a real hard time for his unsteady sword. And I was watching Terunofuji hold the sword, and I thought, that's a pretty steady sword. This means a lot to you. So hopefully that experience, whether Hakuho is gone or not, will be something that helps propel Terunofuji into greater heights of sumo performance. I really would like to see the Terunofuji, who was 12-3, near his debut. But we haven't seen that guy in a long time, and I'm hoping that he comes back. Next, we have Kaisei, another aging veteran who sometimes looks like he's here to stay, and then other times he looks like the age that he's at. He's another one of John's favorites, so usually I defer to John to really analyze, what was going on with Kaisei. I think he's hurt. He didn't offer a whole lot of resistance in the last couple of matches with Tokushoryu and Aoiyama. I think he's hurt. And, the grind of a 2-week tournament, he certainly did look better in the first week. But there's this weird pattern. If you go on to sumo.or.jp and you look at they have these like dark circles, light circles. His is like 2 dark, 2 light, 1 dark, 1 light. Like it's an interesting pattern of up and down, up and down, up and down. So, Kaisei I don't think he's Juryo material yet, but he's going to fall to a place where next tournament is it. Like, he's out of free chances. He's going to wind up in Juryo if he doesn't do something next tournament. Okay, so let's go on to some positive news. Kota no Waka is back. And John and I were very worried about him because he was just like falling out of nowhere. And when a guy is new, you don't know if that's indicative of, okay, he was a rising star and now he's done. Or if it's just a little blip. 12-3, Fighting Spirit Prize. If this was a tournament that any other tournament this, year or so that we haven't had Hakuho in, he would have been vying for the title with the 12-3. And fortunately and unfortunately, however you want to look at it, glass half full, glass half empty, he really wasn't talked about because he wasn't really the storyline. But that 12-3 is so incredibly impressive. Sure, he was Myogiryu 11, but hey, whatever. 12-3, Fighting Spirit Prize, looked awesome. I am excited about the future with him back in the conversation. I want to see him start to fight Hoshoryu. I want to see him fight Kiribayama. I need to see the test of, how does he match up against his fellow up-and-coming stars that are the future of sumo. I can't help but just think positively and say this is not a one-off. Like, he's back, and he's going to show what he's got, and he's going to be in Sanyaku, and, I'm going to say January next year. We cross our fingers for those injuries, but if all continues, January of next year, he'll be in Sanyaku with God only knows who else, because I don't know what'll happen to the salary man or the Mr. Slowwalk. They do put a wrench in the plans for the future guys. But, yeah, amazing, awesome. Good for him getting, $20K. And we will be seeing him in September. He's not going to face Hakuho or Terunofuji, but it'd be nice if we got to see him fight a Yokozuna, because we don't know how long we're going to have Yokozunas. Do we have Hakuho in September? Do we have Terunofuji for a while? Do we have any Ozekis left? It's all just the toss of the coin. But anyway, congratulations, Kota no Waka. Excellent sumo. Very excited that you're back. Next, we have Tochinoshin, who I was writing an obituary for as I was going through the week. And then all of a sudden, he turned back on. And his match with Kotoeko was like, there's the old Tochinoshin. Where have you been? You got a 7-8. You could do this. Like, next tournament is yours. Like, to get an 8-7, of course. But if only those blasted knees were not getting in his way, we could be having, could you imagine a healthy Tochinoshin, a healthy Terunofuji, the top guys battling it out? This is where reality is so cruel, so very, very cruel. I would love to see the Sky Crane versus the Kimidashi. I would love to see the two of them battling it out for tournaments. It's the way sumo should be. Excuse me. But, alas, reality has set in and Tochinoshin's days are numbered, but it doesn't look like they're numbered as of right off into the sunset yet. A 7-8 means that he will stay in the upper division at least one more tournament. Maybe he'll drop down to Myogiryu 13, maybe 14, 13 or 14 probably. So it's not so bad. He knows when he's going to quit. I don't know when he's going to quit. So if he's shooting for a certain number of tournaments or a certain date, I hope that he has the most incredible sumo that he is capable of, because I will cry very large tears the day that Tochinoshin is no longer wrestling in sumo, because he's just the spirit and the essence of sumo for me. He's the big guy who just walks in the ring and he's going to win that match, and it is a shame that he's not ever going to be a Yokozuna, but at least we did get to see him as Ozeki, and that still remains one of my best memories in sumo, no matter what happens from here on out. Next, we have Kageyaki, whom was in that really hard last day Darwin match. He comes out on the other end of it. You know, Meisei prevails and Kageyaki falls. He did get a 7-8, so, you know, he probably could fall to Myogiryu 13, maybe Myogiryu 14 as well. Maybe him and Tochi will just do a complete fall down together. Something is just off in Kageyaki land. I do believe it's mental. I do believe it's some sort of lingering struggle that, you know, it may not be solved. You can always have hope that it will be. That with each passing day, whatever's going on, something can change. And I really hope that for Kageyaki. He just seems a little lost out there, but in the end, he did persevere enough to keep himself from tumbling too far. So, I mean, that would be the glimmer in the dark that, you know, there's still fight in him and there's still a will to turn his fortune around. So we will be looking forward to Kageyaki next tournament, and hopefully he's going to have a breakout tournament that none of us see coming. Next we have Chiyomaru, 6-9, Myogiryu 13. I don't think he's going to hit Juryo yet. I could be wrong about that, but I think he might be okay. He had a Chiyomaru tournament. I mean, Chiyomaru has been struggling for years now. I'm supposing, you know, it's also an age thing, the slow decline. He looks about the same way that he's looked as far as his level of sumo. It might be slightly elevated, but I think he really is, you know, he was in Juryo for a reason, for as long as he was. But, I mean, he fought his way back up. He should have at least one more tournament in the upper division, so we'll see what he can do. I mean, I always enjoy seeing the lime green, the cheeriness, the big belly sumo of Chiyomaru, so I hope that he is able to turn it around and we get to see some more battles with our friend. But he is on that list of aging veterans that we probably won't have for too much longer, so you should enjoy him while he lasts. Next, we come to Ura, the infamous Ura, who I've been hearing about through Chris Sumo, and that's the only reason I knew about him, because by the time I started watching, Ura was on his way down. Now, what I didn't know until I was watching the NHK World Preview show is that his injury occurred against Takakeisho. Takakeisho had not been in sumo for very long before he rose. So I just missed Ura. So I was coming in fresh, didn't know anything about him besides that he was supposedly the man. I watched, everything that Chris had to show us. And it was a rough start. I mean, he was always exciting, but he had some of that Tobizaru where like he would get flung out of the ring. And one time he did like a somersault out of the ring. And I was so worried for him because I know he's got the bad knees. And I'm like, oh my God, can he endure this? But he did. He would just keep, it's like, it seemed like he was uninjurable. He just, like a rubber band or something. Like you could just spring him in every different direction and he was still fine. He could fly out of the ring and he was okay. If he didn't have all the braces, I wouldn't even know he was injured. With that being said, he did pull out all these like super cool moves and the crowd was so excited to see him. And he is a rock star. I am so excited that the hype was all warranted. I'm so glad that he wasn't like back in a state of like kind of injured so he couldn't do his thing. Wow, I can't wait to see 10-5 Ura go up the ranks. I'm guessing with the 10-5, he could go up. He could go up to Maegashira 8. He could. It depends on, what they want to do. Maybe they'll be cautious, but I'm looking forward to seeing, it's like seeing Enho for the first time. I can't wait to see each person that I've never seen him fight before. Now, some of them have seen him before, but I haven't. So I don't know what to expect. And I mean, he's just super cool. I could see why people were excited. I could see why Chris was excited. I'm looking very forward to more tournaments where he can be more in the conversation. It started off at first where I thought, okay, maybe he's going to get a 7 and 8. Like maybe he's just not ready. And then all of a sudden he's just throwing people and dancing around and cartwheeling and, right into a 10-5. So I hope his knees hold out. I hope that we get, Daring to Dream. I shouldn't do this now because it's usually a preview show situation, but an Ura Terunofuji match would be the most epic match in the world, especially if there was some sort of promotion on the line. The two guys with the injuries that were just poised to be something great, coming back and fighting each other for pride. I can't imagine a better scenario than that. So we will stay tuned for Ura and see what he can show us next. I think September is going to be quite the delight. Next we have Daieisho, whom 4-11, going back to Juryo, not really a surprise. He hasn't looked good for a couple of tournaments, and before that he was in Juryo. So I really do think that at this stage, unless Daieisho pulls out something magical, he really is a Juryo man. And I reserve, getting too into that because I don't know a ton about him. And he is now also at the end of his career. So I want to just say that for now, Juryo makes a lot of sense. And I'll have to see, if he makes a strong showing in Juryo, if that is the incorrect place for him to be. Next we have Chiyonoho, 7 and 8. It looks like he will be going back to Juryo as well. Chiyonoho was in a Darwin match with Ichi Yamamoto on the final day. Now, Ichi Yamamoto... Oh, actually, no, that wasn't a Darwin match. Ichi Yamamoto... Yes, it was. Sorry, I'm getting confused here. Ichi Yamamoto was brand new to the upper division. So he really needed that Kachikochi to stay in. So it really was a who's going to Juryo match. And Ichi came out on top. Chiyo was going back down. But, them's the breaks sometimes. And I think Chiyo will be back again. I think this is what happens when you're at the bottom. Like, sometimes your stay is very short. But, I think he'll be back. I think this is just a blip in the screen. I can't say for sure, to the quality, because it was, it was up and down. He was a new face for me to see, so I can't make too much of a judgment on one tournament. But I didn't think that he fought bad. I think it very easily could have gone the other way. He could have been an 8-7. It was Ichi Yamamoto's day, and it wasn't Chiyo day. And I think just having a taste will bring him back hungry and that much more stronger. Next, I want to talk about these guys in tandem, because they really were the pair of the tournament. And that's Tsurugisho and Tokushoryu. Very different fighters, but very similar kind of situations. Each guy, a very strong fighter, a very big guy. It was very cool to watch them fight because they were such similar body types. And in that case, Tokushoryu got the better of the two. They both came in with this sort of fiery spirit of, this is going to be my tournament, in terms of, I'm not down and out yet. I have more to show. I have more to prove. And in the end, it was so close for both of them. Tsurugisho winds up on the heaven side of things with an 8-7, and Tokushoryu winds up on the hell side of things with a 7-8. One man's getting promoted, one man's going to Juryo. So, Tokushoryu was our wonderful surprise winner in January 2 years ago, and one of the great stories in sumo, and he's got a lot of heart and a lot of fight left in him, so it's probably really hard to go back down to Juryo, but I don't think we've seen the last of him either in his superior ballet moves. I just think Tsurugisho was in the same boat, fighting just as hard, and in the end, he's the one who gets the little bit of an edge. So Tokushoryu, he's capable of winning the Juryo Yusho. He's capable of coming right back up as long as there's no injuries. It's just he is kind of on the cusp of, he's got the heart and the skill to be better than that record, but just everything has to fall in place. And he's got a lot of young guys to fight. He's got a lot of an uphill climb. But if anybody can do it, it's him. So, on the positive note, I think we'll see him back. I just think Tsurugisho, in the grand destiny of things, just wanted it a little bit more. Maybe had a little bit extra oomph. And so Tsurugisho wins this battle of the two aging veterans with the hearts of gold. And next we go to Maegashira 16, Shio no Kuni. My guy. Love that guy. Unfortunately, he didn't have what he had when he first came up, and I think there is this sort of adrenaline that pumps when you first return to the top division and that everybody benefits from. That's why you had those weird tournaments, like 3 tournaments where the bottom guy won the whole Yusho. Because you do get this injection of adrenaline when you're back up for the first time in a long time. That adrenaline has worn out, and he's starting to look more normal. With that being said, he had a good tournament before the, next injury, because he is quite injury prone with that style that he has. So it's like just not enough this time, Chiyo no Kuni. You're a bruiser, you're a battler, you have some good tricks of the trade and you can hang in there with anybody, but your rough and tumble style is gonna result in like either epic wins or disastrous losses. So, and injuries, lots and lots and lots of injuries. So, with that being said, he's headed back down to Juryo, which is a bummer. But I do think we'll see him back again as long as one of these injuries doesn't become a thing. I mean, Ikiyoi hung in there for a very, very long time with basically no part of his body functioning. So I think Chiyonokuni could do the same. I hope for better for him than that, but he's got enough tools that I think we'll also see him back. Next, we have Maegashira 16 Ishiura, one of my first favorites, because he was the only little man in sumo when I started watching. And he was real cool back then, but then he started getting into weird Hanka land where he would Hanka all the time and people could read it, so he was getting like speared out of the dohyo, and it really cost him. So I'm glad he's going back to his old ways and doing the different, grabbing the belt and doing the spins and grabbing the legs and doing the throws. And his match with Ura was very, very entertaining. So I know Ishiura is getting sort of the injection of, maybe he knows the situation with Hakuho. Maybe he knows when Hakuho plans to retire. Maybe he doesn't. But I know he wants to stay up there and be a part of that Yokozuna ceremony as long as he can. And I think that was a good impetus for him to fight harder than ever before. And he wound up with a 9-6, which is way better than I expected. So kudos to Ishiura. I hope he gives us some more small man sumo that we've been missing without Enho. And I look forward to seeing him fight various different fighters as time goes on. And finally, we have Ichi Yamamoto, the brand new guy. He did not join the ranks of those who have made their debut. Yeah, he wasn't going to win this tournament with Hakuho and Terunofuji, dated for a date with destiny. Not even Takakeisho was going to be around for that. But anyway, I digress. Ichi Yamamoto was a nice surprise. It was really cool that he, fought the way he did. He fought real hard in the last day. He gets to stay with us and show us what he's got. And I look forward to many more commentaries on him as I get to know him as a fighter. Which brings us to the end of my broadcast. Excuse me. John will be doing his version tomorrow. I will quickly say that I'll restate the fact that Koto no Waka won the Fighting Spirit Prize and Hoshoryu won the Technique Prize. This is a first for both of them. It looks like Hoshoryu is now 22. He just had a birthday. And Koto no Waka is 23. So we have something very exciting brewing when you have Hoshoryu and Koto no Waka just a year apart, both getting the Fighting Spirit Prizes. It reminds me of years ago when Yu Takayama and Asanoyama were getting prizes, and then for that brief period of time when those two were the rising stars. May this be a foreshadowing of things to come. I certainly hope so. I'll leave on this note, which is I'm not sure what we will see of Hakuho. I don't know if this is his last tournament or not. I suspect it's not. I suspect he'll go for one more. I could be wrong. But if it is his final tournament, it has been a pleasure to watch him, despite all of the shots, I took at him today. I prefer the Hakuho of old who could just belt sumo you into oblivion without any tricks. But I would say that sumo reflects life, and life is very unpredictable. And it's often messy. And sometimes things just don't work the way we want them to in our perfect fantasy stories. So I give Hakuho all the credit in the world coming back the way he did, beating a world-class wrestler like Terunofuji, taking the title once again in front of his family. And, I hope he has a bright future, whether that's in the ring whether that's outside of the ring or whatever it is he chooses to do. And I hope the Sumo Association doesn't make his life too difficult. And Terunofuji, I really, really hope that your elbow is fine. And I can't wait to see you put on the white belt. This is Maria signing off of 42 Opinions. Peace.